Hey, 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 guys. Welcome to Building This Community.
This is your city business and policy development podcast. We're your hosts,
Luke Patrick
and Andrew Klump. Welcome to this week's episode of Building This Community. Our guest today is Dan Issel, who is one of the greatest basketball players in the University of Kentucky history, all-time leading scorer, and he also played for the Kentucky Colonels in the ABA. Dan, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm terrific. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be on with you.
So, Dan, I gave a brief background on how your playing career and how you're a current Hall of Famer, but can you give us some insight into what you got into after you hung up the sneakers, especially how you became involved with the NBA to Louisville movement?
Sure. After I retired as a player with the Denver Nuggets, I did about everything you can do with the Nugget organization. I was assistant general manager. I did the color on the television broadcasts. I was head coach on 2 occasions and was general manager and president of the organization for a while, and retired from the Nuggets in the early 2000s. And then I opened up a business in Colorado. It's a business that disposes of water that comes up in oil and gas wells. Mm-hmm. And, of course, you have to be very careful in how you dispose of that water. But I sold that company about 2 years ago, and really wasn't doing anything when I was approached by a group here in Louisville that thought that the opportunity to acquire an NBA expansion team was close, and not doing anything in Colorado and having ties to Kentucky basketball, it sounded like a fun project, and it certainly has been a fun project to work on.
Well, it sounds like you're a pretty good fit for this too, right? So, not just a player, but a coach, and you've been around the league for such a long time that you probably have the connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all of that going on and everything the movement's doing, what do you see the benefit of bringing an NBA team to Louisville? What do you think that would do for our city?
How much time do I have?
As much as you want, Dan, as much as you want.
It would be so important to our Commonwealth and our city, economically, socially, image-wise. I think I'd start by looking at the larger cities around us. There was a time when Louisville was the same size, if not bigger, than cities like Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and Nashville. And if you look at those cities, they have, in my estimation, with their growth and the things that are going on there, have kind of gone ahead of our city. And, there are numerous reasons for that. But if you look at those cities, all of them have multiple professional teams. And so we're close. We have a lot of great things going on in Louisville. The convention center being renovated, all the new hotels downtown. The Bourbon Trail has certainly gained attention, if not nationally, internationally, and so it would certainly help our image. Secondly, financially, we lose a lot of our bright young people to other areas, other states, other communities when they're looking for employment. And having a professional basketball team in the Commonwealth would make recruiting companies much easier. We'd be able to keep our young people, some of our young people at home. And then socially, the league and the teams do so much for the community. The league has NBA Cares. Every NBA team has their own community ideas that they like to work on and favorite charities that they get aligned with. And then almost every player has his own foundation that he gives back to the community. So there's just so many positives with having one of the professional sports franchises in your town and in your state.
Well, and I think the thing that you picked up on there more that I believe has been left out of the conversation a lot is the NBA cares aspect of the NBA. In that, right now we have Rondo and other people that are from this area already come out and do charity work or buy groceries for people or other charitable acts in the city. But I mean, do you think with everything that's ongoing right now throughout the country, do you think that the NBA cares would be kind of a great bridge to help mend racial and social justice issues that are happening in this country?
No question about it. Not only NBA cares, but like I said, all of the players have their own charities, their own charitable foundations that they do work in the communities that they play in. You may not know this, but it is required contractually of every player in the NBA to make a certain number of community appearances on behalf of the team. Now, that doesn't count the ones that they get paid for. Say a bank wants to have one of the players come and sit in the lobby and sign autographs for 2 hours. They're compensated for that, but they're also required to make non-compensated appearances in the community. And some do it better than others. Some only do it on the 2 or 3 times that they're required to do it. But a lot of them really get involved in the community because a lot of these players were in the same place as some of these youngsters are when they were growing up. So there's no question that having an NBA team is a great community partner.
Well, Dan, I think those are great examples of what an NBA team and NBA players can do for our community. But moving on to talk about how we can actually get these teams here, what type of person do you think an NBA team is looking for in terms of owners or an ownership group? Like who fits that mold?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first took this position, I thought finding somebody, and when we first started this, we thought we were talking in the range of $1.5 billion, anticipating $1 billion franchise fee and about $500 million to get a team up and running. I'm not so sure. It might not be a little bit more than that. And so coming into this, my primary concern was where are we going to find that person? But now that's one of the least of my concerns because we have 7 different groups and individuals under non-disclosure agreements, people that are interested in owning a professional sports franchise. And the problem is, or not the problem, the challenge is that when we start talking to these people, of course, the first question they ask is, that sounds great. When is it going to happen? And, we can't give them a timeline. And so that they lose interest a little bit. Not in the project, but in how quickly they have to act. And so obviously the NBA is looking for owners that are very sound financially, that can handle a downturn, much like we're experiencing right now. The owners in the NBA have lost a lot of revenue the last 6 months, but they're looking for a strong financial commitment that can keep the team going, even if there are some setbacks. And I'm quite confident when we have our opportunity to present our case to the NBA, we'll be able to come up with that ownership group or person pretty quickly.
So, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But so I've heard you say in the past, you want Louisville to be next in line, first on the pile with our application. So what does it mean to be ready and to be ready for expansion, and what does that look like?
Yeah, well, first of all, the way that it'll happen is if and when, and by the way, the NBA's position right now is that expansion isn't on the table, but I know a little bit about how the NBA works, and that'll be their position until the day before they start taking applications. So if and when the NBA does expand, there will be applications, and there will be plenty of competition we're assuming 2 new franchises. Some of the more prominent cities you hear mentioned is Seattle and Las Vegas and Mexico City and Kansas City. So there will be competition, and you will get a chance to present your case. And so obviously a NBA-ready arena is of high importance, and community support is also of a great deal of importance. They have to know that the people in that community are interested in having an NBA team in their city. And so what we're doing now primarily until we get a chance to make that application is to build support through different programs, and we have a lot of very talented people on our board and on our committees that are working in that direction. And I think, as you said earlier, when given the opportunity, I think we'll be able to make a pretty compelling argument that the NBA belongs in the Commonwealth.
Well, I think you made some great points there, especially bringing up that we have an arena that could easily accommodate an NBA team right now. But aside from that, does Louisville need to do anything to prove it's ready for expansion? Do you think there's anything we could do to better situate ourselves for that?
Well, what we would like to do is we have a very professionally made website. Lisa Siebert, who is on our board, owns a local company called Mightily, and she and her team designed a new website for us that's been up for about a month or 6 weeks. It's NBA 2LOU, NBA, the number 2, LOU, and there are ways there to get involved. We have an ambassador club, which has a fee involved with some pretty good perks, we think, and there's also what we call the NBA Duluth supporter, which is free, and if you just sign in with your email, you'll get our quarterly newsletters and any updates that we have. And so, we'd like to encourage as many people to sign up as supporters so that we can use that number when we go to the NBA.
So since you brought up the ambassadors program and the supporter section, is the supporter section new? Is that something that's been recently developed? I know, obviously, NBA Lou's looking for some of the fees and the financial assistance and what you all are doing to get your program operating or continue operating. How long have you had the supporter group, and what are you trying to showcase, I guess, from having the ambassador and the supporter group?
Well, if you go to the website, there's 3 different levels on the Ambassador Club, and you're right, the supporter is new because we knew that not everybody would have the financial wherewithal to be involved. The top level is the Lifetime Insider, and that is $350, and that will. There's all kinds of benefits. We recently, one of the things that the bourbon industry has really gotten behind us And we've had several distilleries support us with a barrel of bourbon, which we've been able to bottle with our own medallion or label on it, and get out to our supporters. So the most recent one was a Weller Full Proof. It came out of Buffalo Trace, and we were able to sell our first 125 Lifetime Insiders that bottle at cost, which was $80. And if you go to the secondary market, that bottle right now is selling for $350. So those 125 first-time signers for the Lifetime, if they choose to sell their bottle, and a couple of them have, they've paid for their membership, for their Lifetime membership, with a bottle of bourbon. The annual Insiders at $125. The Super Fan for $30. And if you go to the website and look at the Ambassador Club levels, you'll be able to see all the perks that are included with those memberships, and of course the supporter group for free, getting the quarterly newsletter and updates is on there as well.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, who doesn't like Weller bourbon? That's a great choice, in my personal belief. But you mentioned earlier, I heard you talked about some of the other cities that are routinely in the discussion for expansion possibilities.
Right.
Is there any conversation between the group that's trying to bring the NBA to Louisville and maybe potential ownership groups in those cities like Seattle, Vegas, even Mexico City? Is there any possibility for like a dual pitch, or if there is conversation, is it more adversarial?
There is, to answer your question, there is no conversation, and if there was, it might be adversarial. I'll give you an example. Tim Wicki, who was president of the Denver Nuggets the first time I was coach there, Tim and I were really close friends for a number of years, and Tim is now working with the Oakwood Group, and that group is the arm that has been given the ability to upgrade the Key Arena in Seattle, spending hundreds of millions of dollars upgrading that facility. And also they have been awarded an NHL hockey franchise for starting in the 21-22 season. And I've called Tim a couple of times since I got this job, and thinking that, Tim was a good friend of mine, and he won't return my telephone calls. So I don't think there would be much reason to talk to the other cities. We want to keep our cards close to the vest and make sure we can make them the best presentation we possibly can.
That seems to make sense, Dan, because if you're competing with other cities, you don't really have too much of an incentive to work with them, because it could ultimately set you up for a double cross or someone backdooring you out of the deal. So I think the way that you all are proceeding with this seems to make sense. Bringing it back home a little bit more, though. So the arena, you talked about how Seattle, they upgraded their arena. Our arena is ready to go, but there's still that tricky lease with the University of Louisville. Do you think it's an issue to get it for currently, or if like renegotiation, do you think that would be palatable with U of L if, say an NBA team is knocking at the door?
Yeah, the Yum Center was designed and built. Jim Host, who kind of headed up that Yum Center project, told me on several occasions that it was designed and built with the idea that it would someday house an NBA team. And so the arena would automatically be one of the top 10 arenas in the NBA. It's spectacular. It has all of the amenities an NBA team would want, including, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, a practice floor on the same level. And that's very important because an NBA team would be practicing when there are other events taking place in the arena. So it's a great arena. The U of L question is interesting. There would have to be some negotiations with the lease they have, but the Yum Center would certainly welcome 41 more dates a year, a minimum of 41 more dates a year, to help with the financial situation there. And I'm pretty positive that something could be worked out if and when we need to talk to U of L about access to the Yum Center.
Well, and to that, right, the NBA is talking about, especially because of coronavirus, they've already pushed back their season with their bubble and everything. But now they're talking about potentially starting next season around Christmas Day and maybe making that the permanent start date. Do you think that alleviates some of the scheduling issues with U of L?
There would be no scheduling issues with U of L. U of L men's and women's play at the very most 20 dates a year, and you look at there are numerous arenas around the country that host both NBA and NHL teams. The arena. The Staples Center in L.A. has 2 basketball teams and a hockey team, and so over a 6-month NBA season, there would be plenty of dates to be able to house the University of Louisville men's and women's teams and an NBA team. So the scheduling would not be a problem. It would just be if U of L was afraid of the competition that an NBA team would bring. And we have reams of data. The Greater Louisville was very kind. A few years ago, we were on a list of preliminary sites for the new Amazon building. And Greater Louisville has shared all the information that was gathered at that time. And I can tell you that there is no doubt that the Commonwealth can support all of the college teams that have very successful programs here and an NBA team.
So, Dan, I want to talk about naming rights for a second. We see other cities that do have NBA teams in their arenas. They're able to generate a lot of competition and derive a ton of revenue from those naming rights. At Louisville, we do okay with our naming rights, but what do you think our negotiating position would be like if we were to fill our stadium with an NBA team?
I think it's very interesting. The naming rights on arenas and stadiums and all kinds of facilities for that matter. I think companies are starting to realize, how beneficial that is. And I think it all started when media, newspapers, radio, and TV started using the name of the arena in their announcing and in their writing. When it first started happening, I remember in Denver when we built the Pepsi Center, for a while, people wouldn't call it the Pepsi Center. On TV, they'd say the Nuggets Arena, or in the newspaper, one guy even called it the Can. But then the attitude kind of changed, and now it's kind of second nature that everybody uses the name of the arena in their reporting. And so, I think the Yum Corporation got an unbelievable bargain for what they paid for the naming rights on the Yum Yum Center. And, I don't know if it was discussed that because it was the University of Louisville, the major tenant, that it was more a regional thing. But, having your name on an arena is very beneficial nationally. And so I would think with an NBA team, the next naming rights contract would be much higher than it is now.
That makes a lot of sense. Dan, well, we appreciate you taking the time. We got two final questions here for you before we let you go. The first one is, you kind of mentioned the ambassadors program and the supporter program. Are there any other ways to get involved, or is that the main promotion that you all have at this point? And what should people be doing?
We're always looking for people to help, but we have 3 different committees associated with NBA to Lou. One is our ambassador committee. One is our marketing committee that's headed up by Eric Gunderson, Nick Phelps up the ambassador committee, and then we haven't talked about our Legends golf tournament that we have every year. That is headed up by Seth Eaton, and we have like 24 different local companies that support our Legends golf tournament. And so anybody who's interested in working on one of those committees, we'd love to have you. And again, all you have to do is go to the website. It talks about the Legends golf tournament and how you could get involved there. Or so there's a lot of different ways. It's all on the website, and we invite anybody who wants to help us out to please do so.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on to talk to us today. But one final question we'd like to ask all of our guests before we let them go. If you could change one policy in Louisville, one aspect of Louisville, what would it be?
That's a great question, and I think I'm not sure it's a policy as much as it is an attitude. I know you all have been supporters of bringing the NBA to Louisville, but for some reason, and I don't know why, but Kentuckians kind of have an attitude that, we can't do that. We're too small. We don't have enough money. Reason after reason as to why we can't do things. And I mentioned before, I just drove through Nashville this past weekend. I stopped counting the number of cranes at 12 that were building high-rise buildings. There's no reason why Louisville and Kentucky were such a well-kept secret. This is a great state and a great community, and our leaders and our business community needs to roll up their sleeves and quit saying we can't do that, and instead say, by golly, let's go to work and get this done.
Dan, I couldn't agree more with you, and I felt like you were just giving the city of Louisville a pep talk, like you were, the coach of the Denver Nuggets. So,
yeah, that was a great point.
We can do this, and there are so many. As I said earlier, we're so close. Andrew, I have a dear friend who is, his father was my academic advisor when I was at UK, so you can imagine what an impossible task that was. But anyway, his son now is the head of the Atlanta Convention and Tourism Department. And he called me shortly after I took this job, and he said, you're on to something. He said, with Louisville's facilities, the Bourbon Trail, the horse racing, he said, we're finding Louisville to be more and more competition for the conventions we're trying to draw to Atlanta. So we're not that far away. We just have to take that next step and convince ourselves that we can get it done.
You're right, Dan, and one or two things, and I think we'll be on that national stage with Atlanta and everybody else. Well, Dan, we really appreciate you stopping on here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for talking to us, Dan.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
We'll pick back up with our reaction segment after a word from our sponsor.
think that was a great interview with Dan. I love that he hit a myriad of topics that he doesn't really necessarily hit when he's been on other radio shows. What were some of the things that you kind of took away?
I think the thing that maybe stood out most, his answer to our final question, essentially he was saying to me that Kentucky has a self-image problem. We don't see ourselves as a state that can sustain, major business or a pro sports team. And I think that's true. I personally have fallen victim to that kind of thinking. As a state, Kentucky often languishes like at the bottom of most lists that you'd like to be at top of. And, if we could bring in a pro sports team, I think it would start the process of reforming that self-image.
Well, that changes
our confidence.
And that changes our image nationally too, right?
Yeah, it immediately makes us not just national, but an internationally recognizable city in some.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's also important with that too is I think truly that the self-image around us being able to handle an NBA team has changed. And I think Dan and that support group has really turned the tide on that in the city of Louisville and the state of Kentucky. I think people genuinely want that now. So I think he's done a great job with it. The other thing that I was very impressed with in that response was just the passion in his voice, that you can tell that he cares so much about the state and wants to see it succeed, that you need that kind of driving force when you have any type of social movement or business movement, and this is just one of them. So I'm glad to see that, even though he's normally even keeled. I'm glad to see the passion that he had there. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if you've been following the conversation around NBA to Louisville, you've definitely heard Dan speak. I mean, he's been the face of it since pretty much the get-go, and I think he's done a great job. I really loved what he had to say today.
Yeah, and getting more into that social aspect, I'm very glad to hear they're doing the supporter position as well, in addition to the paid ambassador program position that you can sign up for. So that's something that I think they've missed for a while. And I know it's been a slow development. Like, they had to organize, they had to bring in investors, they had to do everything. And then they launched the ambassador program, and then they launched the supporter program. So it's definitely been a slow rollout. It's been strategic. But the thing that I think is really important is really connecting to the community. And I think part of that is, and a little bit about my background, how I had resolutions passed by 9 different cities, and then with Louisville, Metro Louisville 1 makes it 10, where it was just different municipalities trying to support an NBA team coming to Louisville. And I think that kind of stuff where we get social support, legislative support, maybe we get events where we can get tons of pictures with huge amounts of NBA Louisville fans, those types of things are supplemental to what Dan and the group are doing. And I think they're invaluable when trying to lure an ownership group or kind of talk to the NBA.
Yeah. I think you honestly did some great work when you were working on that Bring the NBA to Louisville initiative for Audubon Park and trying to expand it into all the different municipalities, located in Jefferson County. I think I wish I had some kind of crystal ball to know when the decision is going to be made for expansion, to know when this is on the horizon.
I think it happens at the end of the next CBA deal, which I believe is 2025.
That's what everyone's saying. And I understood when Dan was talking about potential investors being slightly hesitant because he can't guarantee a date. I get that, but the thing that we have going for us, and it was talked about all throughout the interview, we've got the arena for it right now. And as he said, it wouldn't just be an NBA arena. It would be one of the best, coming right off the bat, the second a team moves in there.
Well, now with that said, they would have to do some renovations to, I think, make the broadcasting a little bit more suited towards the NBA, which I think is very minor. And I think they would also they're under the average number of suites for an NBA arena, so they would have to add more and probably reduce capacity. But the Yum Center is too big right now as it is.
Yeah, we're talking about like minor remodeling stuff. Yeah. And when you compare that to building a fresh arena and the amount of public resources that go into that. I mean, we saw what went into building the Yum Center in the first place, and we're not capturing nearly the revenue that we could if we were to fill that with an extra 41 guaranteed games in an NBA with an NBA team in there. You know, that means that there are more nights of the year that we guarantee revenue for the city. And when we have this massive expenditure that is the Yum Center already on the books, it only makes sense to do everything you can to try and drive a team into that, or, you know, into that space.
Yeah, and if you're adding the suites, like I mentioned earlier, that's going to make the concerts you have more valuable. That's going to make all the games you have more valuable. Yeah. So the investments that they would have to put into it would be strategic and would be beneficial generally.
Yeah, no question.
And I think the thing that has been overlooked for a long time in this discussion that Louisvillians really need to recognize, and I'm glad Dan brought it up, was the naming rights. We're looking at the cost or what we're getting from Yum is $13.5 million over 10 years, which at the time was a decent deal. Like, was, I think, market rate. But the issue is we're a regional arena. And so because there isn't an NBA team, as these numbers have just skyrocketed over the last 10 years, we're going to miss out when it renegotiates, at least in my opinion. Because right now, most of these teams were on 20-year deals, and they went from close to what we had to now you're having 10 teams that are making at least $6 million per year, a couple of which were almost insane, with Toronto getting a 20-year, $639 million deal, and the Golden State Warriors getting a 20-year, $300-400 estimated deal. So, but most of them are making between, $4 to $7 million, which is almost half of what we're making over the course of 10 years.
No, absolutely.
And they're doing that per year. And so that's the issue. We're just going to miss out on so much money because we just can't compete on that national and international branding stage, which Dan mentioned was so important.
It only stands to reason. I mean, if you're a major corporation and you've got advertising dollars to throw around, would you rather have your name on a college basketball arena or an NBA basketball arena? And we're talking about the same arena, but the price you're willing to pay, there's a clear premium for it being an NBA arena. You're getting so much more national exposure. I think it pays dividends for the city if we're able to attract that team.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. And so then you have all of that. You have the arena money with the new suites and making it more financially stable. And then you're also adding the jock tax, right? Where you're essentially getting all these different NBA players, close to 15 per team, plus all the assistants. You're getting almost 20 millionaires added just living in this city overnight.
It goes beyond that even. If you're talking about revenue for the city, if another NBA player
LeBron James.
If LeBron James, whose salary is just gaudy, plays a game in Kentucky captures some of that revenue. Players are played on a per game basis, and if their game is played here, we get to capture that tax revenue. And a lot of people don't know that, but that just adds to the known financial incentives to try and make this deal happen.
Yeah, and I think it's too big of a pie to miss. And that there are so many needs of this city that amount of money could go towards and help.
Yeah.
But then it's also the other aspect, the flip side of, then it changes our branding as a city nationally and internationally. And so Dan hit on a little bit with the Bourbonism and the Derby, but ultimately an NBA team has at least 41 nights a year of games plus playoffs that you just get to be on national and international television. And that will just draw people and businesses to come here. And we've talked about fringe benefits on numerous episodes, right? That ultimately the way cities compete now for businesses, subsidies are still part of it, but having the fringe benefits of professional sports, a botanical garden, an aquarium, or a zoo,
like all these different talent to your city.
Yeah, and that's what. businesses are looking for those types of things for their employees' happiness.
It's a quality of life thing. People
Yes.
want to live in a metropolitan area. There's been a lot of immigration into those types of areas over the last few decades, and it only makes sense, if you're looking from a long-term business planning perspective, you want to make your city attractive. An NBA team does that. And
so it is just an amenities request.
Yeah.
Right. And ultimately, I think what we're getting back to now is the people. The people are just so important with this. And I love that Dan addressed the potential for social and racial justice being potentially healed by some of the things that the NBA does. And I think the NBA Cares is often overlooked. Maybe many people don't really care that much about it, but I think it would make a substantial impact in our community.
Well, I really hope so. And I mean, you see player engagement in their communities and the impact that it can have. And I just don't see there's not a drawback in my eyes to, bringing in that type of person. They all seem, on top of the, like Dan mentioned, the contractual obligation to make some of these community appearances. You see players going way beyond, what's stipulated in a contract, and really trying to do what they can to uplift communities, especially, generally oppressed communities.
The NBA in particular is really trying, and this is the parallel that I love, is that the NBA in particular is really trying to push their players to be more like Muhammad Ali, right? They are trying to have them be both great elite athletes that have name recognition all over the world, and then do something with that platform. They're trying to empower those players to do the same thing. Now, some of the policies they do, they can still be a little bit controlling. That's still the classic, owner versus player issue, or I guess they're governors now. But ultimately, I think they are the most progressive as far as empowerment goes of any of the leagues. And I think that would be a great fit with the history Muhammad Ali kind of played in our city.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like NBA compared to NFL in the way that they've treated recent social justice movements, I don't think there's any question. I'm standing on the side of the NBA on that one.
Yeah, and so I think one thing that's important is, and this goes back to the supporter section a little bit earlier, is that we have to connect. I'm glad the NBA to Lou group is looking at connecting more to the community, but we've got to connect to all parts of our community if you really want to showcase for the NBA. So I would love to see Dan Issel or the group maybe support the Dirt Bowl, like one of the most historic basketball tournaments in the country that happens in Louisville every year, and just seeing how we can use the community here. And maybe I'm biased because that's really what I push for from that resolution perspective. But ultimately, I think using the community to showcase our basketball rabidness here is something that nobody else can show, and that we can really, really put ourselves in a position to attract an ownership group and attract the NBA.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you get the community engaged, it's only going to amplify the message, and it's going to make our pitch that much stronger. I think I think you're exactly right.
What did you think about the not working with other cities at this point?
It makes sense. In my head, I maybe would have pictured that we'd had some kind of communication with the other cities, just because there are so many cities that are hungry for an NBA team. But it's kind of like you want to keep your cards close to your chest. You don't want to share. If you have some kind of insider information, it wouldn't really make sense to divulge that.
Or if you have a relationship with an owner, you don't really want that owner to use you as the go-between with another city. I get that. My one thing, and I'm torn on it, right? But with Seattle, it's almost, I don't know if we should be combative with Seattle or
Dual
not.
pitch?
Because Seattle's getting it. Like,
I think that one's pretty much settled.
Maybe it is too settled, because I don't get how everyone says they were robbed of a team. They chose not to build an arena. Yeah. So that was their own fault. Ultimately, that was their own fault for them losing that team, is they didn't do the renovations. And, Oklahoma City got lucky with Hurricane Katrina, and
they were allowed to host games that couldn't be played in other arenas for a while, and it showed the NBA the enthusiasm that city had.
And that gave the out for the Seattle Sonics. But ultimately, if they had put their pitch in, if they had done the renovations to their arena, they would have been fine.
Yeah, we're facing two different Seattles. I think the Seattle of today is a tech hub. It's growing. It's a massive city, and there's tons of money there. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense, I think, more now than it did when they even had a team back in the 90s.
Agreed. And but I guess my point is, like, should we just go in with Seattle and say, look, we know you're probably getting it. Let's try and pitch it east-west together. But it's so hard. It's so hard to say. Like, it's easy to say that, but it's hard. I think execution with that is more difficult.
That's the only city that I think it would make sense with, because they seem guaranteed to get it. And if they are pushing for us, if they have a preference, then it might add to the offer we're putting forward.
But it seems unlikely that.
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much wrote that one off.
Well, but I think it's a hard ask and a hard thing to execute as well.
And coordinating that, there's a lot of problems there logistically.
Well, and so is there anything else that you saw with this that you think we need to bring up? Is there anything we're missing? No,
we talked about scheduling. Dan didn't seem to think it'd be a problem, and I'm with him on that. Mm-hmm. U of L uses the arena right now, but there are other instances of NBA teams sharing arenas with NCAA teams, and it doesn't seem to be a big issue.
Yeah, I think them changing it to Christmas Day as their start date helps a little bit, but I think the dates that are really an issue would be the ACC ones, because there's just another entity to coordinate. Now, like NBA, like two NBA teams, they're coordinating with each other. The ACC is a little more difficult, but I think that's just additional paperwork.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just,
I don't see that
as planning and logistics is not something that you can't overcome. And we see it. Other teams struggle with this, mm-hmm. but they manage it. It's not such a big issue.
Agreed.
But yeah, that's pretty much it for me, man. I really enjoyed talking to him today.
Yeah. Do you think when it's 2030, do you think we'll have an NBA team?
Oh man, I really hope so. I really, really hope so. I think we're setting up to make a really, really strong pitch, mm-hmm. but I think it's going to be up to the NBA.
Yeah, ultimately. And that's part of the thing that's really depressing, is that we had it in 2001 when cities didn't want NBA teams.
Yeah.
And ultimately, some of the administration at the time had pushed back on. We had a non-binding agreement with the Hornets from Charlotte, and ultimately, our administration decided that they wanted more out of that deal, and now that fell through. And now you look at every city; they're just begging for pro sports. Yeah, and
the appreciation in team value since 2001 is just it's. Yeah. I don't think anybody could have seen it coming, to the degree that it has, but that was, in hindsight, not the best decision.
Yeah, this city would be totally different today.
Yeah, they would look different.
But I think we'll have one by 2030. At least that's my hope. So
yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. But that was, like I said, that was a great interview with Dan, and I'm very glad he took the time to be on our show.
Yeah, definitely, man. Good talking to you today, Andrew.
You too.
As always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us on Building This Community. If you'd like any more information, you can follow us on Twitter at BuildingThisCom, COM, or you can follow Andrew
at Andrew J. Klump. And you can also follow Luke
at LMP43. Definitely subscribe, and we look forward to talking to you guys next week.